The human explorer Daniel never imagined that a simple joke would change the path of his life. He had come to the border world of Arthenis as part of a small survey mission, sent to map the mineral-rich valleys and mountains that shimmered under the alien suns. But the moment his team's ship landed near the royal city, they were surrounded by warriors in gleaming armor. Daniel was taken to a palace unlike anything he had ever seen. Towers carved from white stone rose high into the skies, and banners of deep crimson fluttered in the wind. Alien soldiers with strange markings on their faces guarded every hall, their spears tipped with blades that hummed with hidden energy. The people here were tall, elegant, and carried themselves with an air of silent pride. Their eyes glowed faintly under the light, reminding Daniel that this was a civilization far older and stronger than humanity. He was pushed through grand doors into a hall that seemed larger than any cathedral on earth. The floor was polished, black stone that reflected the flames of tall golden torches. At the far end of the hall sat a throne carved from crystal, and on that throne, leaning forward with calm authority, was the queen. She was striking, not just because of her appearance, but because of the power that radiated from her presence. Her long dark hair flowed like silk over armor adorned with precious stones. A crown of silver rested on her brow, and her eyes were sharp, filled with both wisdom and warning. Every soldier in the room bowed deeply, yet Daniel, still in his dusty explorer's jacket, was the only one standing upright. The queen's gaze fell upon him, and the air seemed to grow heavier. "Human," she said, her voice strong but smooth. "You have crossed into my lands without invitation. Do you understand the weight of this crime?" Daniel swallowed hard. His heart raced, but he forced himself to stay calm. He knew if he appeared weak, he would be crushed without a thought. He looked around and saw the guards' hands tight on their weapons, waiting for a single order to end him. Trying to lighten the tension, Daniel's lips curved into a small, nervous smile. "Forgive me," he said, raising his hands slightly. "I didn't mean to intrude. I only came here to admire the beauty of your world. And now, here I stand before its greatest beauty. My queen." He said the last words with a playful tone, more like a nervous joke than a declaration. But the moment they left his lips, silence filled the hall. Every guard's eyes widened. Some even stepped forward, certain the queen would punish this strange human who dared to speak so casually. But to everyone's surprise, the queen did not grow angry. Instead, her head tilted ever so slightly, as if she was curious. The corners of her lips twitched, though not enough to form a smile. For a moment her eyes, so sharp and commanding, softened as though she was caught off guard. The silence stretched longer. Daniel felt his stomach twist, realizing he might have just sealed his fate with a foolish attempt at humor. But then, the queen lifted her hand, and with one calm wave the guard stepped back. "Leave us," she ordered, her voice steady. The soldiers hesitated. One brave captain stepped forward and bowed low. "Your Majesty, this creature spoke to you without respect. Allow us to—" "Did you not hear me?" the queen interrupted, her voice turning cold. "I said leave us." Reluctantly, the guards obeyed. One by one, they marched out of the hall until only Daniel and the queen remained. The giant doors closed with a deep echo, sealing him alone with her. Daniel's heart thumped loudly in his chest. He had no weapon, no escape. All he had was his wit. He kept his nervous smile, though his hands trembled slightly. The queen rose from her throne and descended the steps with grace. Each footstep echoed across the hall as she approached him. She circled him slowly, studying him as if he were a rare animal. "Tell me, human," she said at last, her voice low but clear. "Why did you call me your queen? Was it meant as mockery? Or was it submission?" Daniel thought quickly. He knew his answer might determine whether he lived or died. "Neither," he said carefully. "It was meant as, humor. Where I come from, sometimes we use humor to ease tension, and honestly—" He hesitated, then decided to risk honesty. "You truly do look like a queen, powerful, untouchable. I just said it the only way I knew how." The queen stopped in front of him. For the first time, she looked at him not as a prisoner but as something else. There was no smile, but there was interest. She studied his face, his eyes, and the way he stood without bowing. Humor, she repeated softly, almost as if testing the word. Your kind hides fear behind laughter? Daniel shrugged lightly. Sometimes, but sometimes it's more than that. Sometimes it's how we show courage when we don't have swords or armies. Her eyes narrowed. She leaned closer, her presence so strong it nearly overwhelmed him. And are you showing courage now? Daniel met her gaze, though his heart hammered in his chest. Maybe. Or maybe I'm just terrible at being scared. For the first time, the Queen's lips curved into the faintest hint of a smile. It was small, almost invisible, but it was there. You are either very foolish, she said, or very brave. Why not both? Daniel replied, trying to keep the mood light. The Queen let out a quiet breath that almost sounded like a laugh, though it was too soft to be certain. She turned and began to walk back toward her throne, her cloak trailing behind her. You interest me, human, she said as she sat down again. No one has dared speak to me in such a manner. Not my generals, not my advisors, not even my own family. Daniel frowned slightly. Then maybe they're missing something important. The Queen raised an eyebrow. And what would that be? That sometimes, Daniel said slowly, a ruler needs to hear truth without fear, or even a little joke, to remind them they are still people. Her eyes lingered on him for a long moment. The air in the hall no longer felt as heavy as before. For the first time since entering the palace, Daniel felt he might not die today. The Queen leaned back on her throne. You speak boldly for someone in chains. Daniel glanced at his wrists, still bound by a metal restraint. He gave her a small grin. Well, words are the only weapons I have right now. Might as well use them. She studied him again, her gaze unreadable. Then, with a flick of her hand, she summoned 2 attendants who entered quietly from the side. Remove his chains, she commanded. The attendants obeyed, unlocking the restraints from his wrists. Daniel rubbed his hands, feeling a rush of relief. He glanced up at the Queen. Thank you, my Queen, he said, this time with genuine respect instead of nervous humor. Her lips curved again, just slightly. Do not grow too comfortable with that title, human. But for now, you may keep it. Daniel felt his breath catch. He realized this was more than just mercy. This was the beginning of something else, something unexpected, dangerous and strange. The hall remained quiet, but in that silence, a new thread had been woven between them. And Daniel understood one thing clearly. His joke had changed everything. Daniel sat in the grand hall, his wrists now free, though the weight of the moment still pressed heavily on him. The Queen remained on her throne, tall and regal, her gaze fixed upon him with sharp curiosity. The silence was not uncomfortable anymore, but it carried a strange energy, like the first spark before a fire. Daniel rubbed his wrists gently, then straightened himself. He had survived the first test. His joke had not cost him his life. But he also knew this was not over. The Queen was not a woman who tolerated weakness or foolishness. Every word he spoke now mattered. You seem too calm for someone standing alone before a queen, she said at last, her voice low but steady. Daniel let out a small chuckle. Truth is, I'm not calm. My heart's racing so fast I can barely think. But where I come from, if you let fear take over, you've already lost. The Queen tilted her head as if studying a puzzle. And how often do humans find themselves facing death that they must speak such lessons? Daniel thought for a moment. More often than we like. Maybe that's why we learned to laugh in the face of it. It doesn't make the danger go away, but it makes it easier to stand against it. The Queen's eyes softened slightly, though her expression remained unreadable. Interesting. My people believe laughter has no place in power. It weakens the throne. It invites chaos. Daniel met her gaze. Maybe. Or maybe it does the opposite. Maybe it shows people that their queen is strong enough to smile even when others can't. The words lingered in the air. Daniel half expected her to snap at him, but instead she leaned back on her throne, thoughtful. For a moment, the room was still. Then slowly, the queen gestured toward the long table near the wall. "Sit," she commanded. "We will talk." Daniel hesitated but obeyed, moving to the table and lowering himself into a chair carved from stone. Servants entered quietly, carrying trays of strange fruit and glowing water in crystal cups. They bowed low and left quickly, leaving the two of them in uneasy peace. The queen rose from her throne and moved to sit across from him. Her presence was overwhelming even here, her crown gleaming in the firelight, her dark hair falling like a river over her shoulders. "Tell me of your people," she said, lifting a piece of fruit between her fingers. "I know the humans have spread across the stars, but we hear little beyond whispers and rumors. Why do you travel so far into lands that do not belong to you?" Daniel chose his words carefully. "Not to conquer. At least, not always. Many of us explore because we're curious. We want to see what's out there to understand it. We've made mistakes, yes, but we also try to learn from them." The queen studied him, chewing slowly, her eyes never leaving his face. "Curiosity," she repeated. "That is both a gift and a curse. It leads to discovery, but it also leads to trouble. You stand here as proof of that." Daniel gave a small, wry smile. "Fair point." She placed the fruit down and folded her hands on the table. "And why do you not tremble before me, human? My people fear my gaze. Even my generals bow without question. Yet you speak to me as though I am merely another voice in the room." Daniel leaned forward slightly. "Because I see more than a throne, I see a person. You may be queen, but you're also someone who wakes up every day with thoughts, doubts, and choices to make. Power doesn't erase that." Her eyes flickered with something, a spark of surprise, maybe even recognition. For a brief moment, her regal mask slipped, and Daniel thought he saw the outline of someone burdened, someone carrying more than anyone should. "Careful, human," she said softly, though there was no anger in her tone. Words like that can be dangerous. Daniel nodded. So can silence. The queen let out a quiet breath, almost like a sigh, and leaned back. "You speak boldly, too boldly. But perhaps that is what makes you different." For the first time, she lifted her cup and drank. Her movements were graceful, but Daniel noticed her eyes remained thoughtful, as if she was weighing invisible scales. Meanwhile, outside the hall, the palace was not quiet. Whispers spread quickly among the guards and advisors. The human was still alive, and worse, the queen had dismissed her guards to speak with him alone. It was unheard of. Some called it madness. Others feared it meant the queen was weakening. Back inside, Daniel did not know of these whispers, but he could sense that his presence was not something the court would accept easily. He had already seen the look of hatred in the guards' eyes. He was no fool. If he stumbled even once, his life would end. Still, he kept speaking. "Where I come from," Daniel said slowly, "leaders are strongest when people trust them. Fear works, but only for so long. Eventually, people want more than to kneel, they want to believe." The queen's eyes narrowed slightly, but not in anger, more in thought. "And do your people believe in their leaders?" Daniel paused. "Sometimes, not always, but when they do, it changes everything." Her gaze held his, steady and sharp. Then she stood, walking slowly around the table until she was standing behind him. Daniel tensed slightly but did not move. Her voice came from just above his shoulder. "You risk much by speaking such truths to me," she said softly. "If my advisors heard your words, they would call for your execution. They would say you are planting seeds of weakness in me." Daniel turned his head slightly enough to meet her eyes without rising from his seat. "Maybe I am planting seeds, but not of weakness." For the first time, the queen allowed herself to smile fully. It was not wide, but it was genuine, a rare glimpse of the woman behind the crown. "You are strange, human," she said. "Strange and dangerous." Daniel gave her a faint grin. "You wouldn't be the first to say that." She laughed quietly. Then the sound soft and almost musical. It was so rare, so unexpected that Daniel felt the moment etch itself into his memory. But the warmth did not last long. A loud knock echoed through the great doors, followed by a voice. "Your Majesty, the council demands audience." The Queen's smile faded, replaced once more by the steel mask of authority. She turned away from him and called out, "You may not enter. I am occupied." "But Majesty," her voice cut through the air like a blade. "Did I not make myself clear?" The hall fell silent again. The Queen returned to her seat, though Daniel noticed her shoulders were a little tenser than before. She glanced at him, and for a brief moment, he saw the conflict in her eyes. He realized she was not only curious about him, she was also risking something by keeping him here. Daniel leaned forward, resting his arms on the table. "Looks like I'm causing you trouble," he said softly. The Queen's eyes met his, sharp and unwavering. "Yes, and I do not yet know if you are worth it." Daniel smiled lightly, though inside he felt the weight of her words. "Then I guess I'll just have to prove that I am." Her lips curved slightly once more. She lifted her cup again, her voice calm. "We shall see, human. We shall see." And, with that, the second meeting between the human and the Queen came to a quiet end. But outside the palace walls, storms were already gathering. The palace of Arthenis was not built for silence, yet silence lingered in its halls after the Queen's strange meeting with Daniel. The guards whispered among themselves, the servants exchanged quick glances, and the council sat in hidden corners, frowning. No one could understand why the Queen had dismissed her guards and spoken privately with a human. To them it was unthinkable. But inside the throne room where the torches burned low, the Queen sat in quiet thought. Daniel's words replayed in her mind. Sometimes a ruler needs truth without fear. They had been bold words, perhaps foolish, but they had touched something in her, a part of herself she had buried long ago. The next morning, Daniel was escorted to a smaller chamber, this time not in chains. It was still guarded, but not with the same hostility as before. A long table stretched across the room and food was set before him. The Queen entered a moment later, her steps light but steady. "You return?" Daniel said, rising slightly. "I return because I wish to," she answered. "Do not mistake this for habit. Few are granted my time twice." Daniel sat again, his eyes steady on her. "Then I'll take it as an honor." The Queen studied him as she took her seat. "Tell me, human, do you always speak this freely? Do your people not punish such tongues?" Daniel smiled faintly. "Oh, we punish it sometimes, but more often we respect it. Free words mean free thinking. Without that, leaders stop hearing what they need to hear." The Queen leaned forward, resting her chin lightly on her hand. "And what is it that I need to hear?" Daniel hesitated. He could feel the sharpness of her question, like a blade hidden behind silk. But he decided to take the risk. "That you don't have to be feared to be respected. That strength doesn't mean being alone." Her eyes narrowed, though not in anger, more in thought. "You speak as if you know me." Daniel shook his head. "No. But I can guess. A ruler as powerful as you, surrounded by people who bow and kneel. When was the last time someone spoke to you without fear?" The question struck deeper than he expected. The Queen said nothing for a long moment. Then she looked away, her gaze distant. "Not since I took the throne." Daniel felt the weight of her words. He leaned back, folding his arms loosely. "That sounds lonely." Her eyes snapped back to him, sharp once again. "Lonely? You dare?" She stopped herself, her tone softening. "Perhaps. But loneliness is a burden of power. It is not something to be pitied." "I'm not pitying you," Daniel said gently. "I'm just saying. Even queens deserve someone who sees them as more than a crown." Words hung in the air like smoke. The Queen's expression was unreadable, but something in her eyes betrayed a flicker of vulnerability. Before she could respond, the heavy doors opened. An advisor entered, bowing low. "Your Majesty, the council demands your presence. They say it is urgent." The queen's jaw tightened. Tell them I will come. The advisor glanced at Daniel, his face twisting with distaste. And the human? He stays, she answered firmly. The advisor bowed again, though his eyes flashed with warning as they lingered on Daniel. Then he left. The queen rose from her seat. Do not wander. You are safe here only because I say so. Daniel nodded. I'll be here when you return. She gave him one last look before leaving, her cloak trailing behind her. The council chamber was filled with voices when the queen entered. Advisors, generals, and nobles sat in a half-circle, their expressions tense. Your Majesty, one of the elder advisors began. This human must be executed at once. Already the palace whispers. Already the people question your judgment. Another general spoke, his hand striking the table. He is a danger. His words are poison. He dares to sit in your presence as if he is your equal. The queen raised her hand, and silence fell. Her eyes swept across them like a storm. You forget yourselves. You dare question whom I choose to speak with? The room fell silent, but the anger did not fade. The queen felt it pressing around her. They would not say it openly, but she knew what they thought, that she was weakening, that the human had planted seeds of doubt. She stood tall, her voice strong. I do not act from weakness, I act from choice. The human stays. If any here doubt my rule, speak now. No one spoke. None dared. But their silence was heavy with resistance. Back in Southern, the smaller chamber, Daniel waited. He walked slowly along the walls, studying the carvings of battles and victories. The images showed the queen's people conquering their enemies, their rulers always depicted as untouchable and divine. Daniel wondered how much of that was truth, and how much was legend. The doors opened, and the queen returned. Her steps were sharper than before, her expression clouded with frustration. Rough meeting? Daniel asked cautiously. Her eyes flicked to him. You truly have no fear, do you? Daniel shrugged lightly. If I'm already in the fire, might as well make conversation. The queen let out a quiet breath, almost like a sigh. She sat down across from him, her fingers drumming softly on the table. My council does not approve of you. They believe you weaken me. Daniel leaned forward. Do you believe that? Her gaze locked on him. For a long moment she said nothing. Then she shook her head. No, but their voices will not be silenced easily. They fear change. Maybe because change scares everyone, Daniel said. It means the old way isn't safe anymore. But sometimes change is what keeps people alive. The queen tilted her head, studying him. You speak as if you know what it means to rule. Daniel smiled faintly. I don't. But I know what it means to survive. Sometimes it's not about strength. Sometimes it's about trust. Her eyes lingered on him, searching. Then, unexpectedly, she asked, Do your people trust you? Daniel hesitated, then laughed softly. Not always, but the ones who know me, they do. Because I never lie to them. The queen leaned back, her expression unreadable. Honesty, she said softly. Such a fragile thing. Fragile, Daniel agreed. But stronger than fear. Silence settled between them again, but it was not cold. It was thoughtful, almost heavy with meaning. The queen's gaze softened slightly. You are not like others. You speak with no chains, yet you remain. Daniel gave her a small smile. Maybe because I see more than just a queen in front of me. Her lips curved, just barely. And what do you see, human? Daniel met her eyes without hesitation. I see someone carrying too much alone. For the first time, the queen's mask cracked fully. She looked away, her jaw tightening, her shoulders stiff. But Daniel caught the flicker of truth before she hit it again. You speak dangerously, she said quietly. Or honestly, Daniel replied. The queen rose suddenly, her cloak swirling around her. She walked toward the doors, then paused, her back to him. Do not forget, human, she said softly. I am queen, and a queen cannot afford to be seen as weak." Then she left, her steps echoing through the hall. Daniel sat alone in the chamber, his thoughts heavy. He knew now that he was more than just a prisoner. He was a spark in a fire much larger than himself. The queen was listening to him, more than she should, perhaps more than she wanted to. And outside the chamber walls, the storm of resistance grew stronger. The palace of Arthenis glittered under the twin moons, but beneath its beauty, tension brewed like a storm. The council was restless, the soldiers whispered, and the people of the city had begun to gossip. Their queen had allowed a human into her private chambers. Worse, she listened to him. Many could not accept it. To them, a human was nothing more than an intruder, unworthy of her attention. Daniel sensed this unease even within the guarded walls. Every time he passed the soldiers, in the hall he saw the way their hands tightened on their spears. He noticed the way servants lowered their heads quickly, not out of respect, but to hide their suspicion. He was not welcome here. The only reason he still breathed was because of the queen. That night, Daniel was again called to a smaller chamber, lit by torches. The queen stood by the window, her cloak flowing as the moonlight bathed her face in silver. She did not turn as he entered, but her voice carried across the room. "Do you know what my council called you today?" she asked. Daniel shook his head. I can imagine it wasn't something kind. Her lips curved faintly, though her back was still turned. "They called you a shadow, a whisper of doubt. They say you weaken me." Daniel stepped closer, careful but unafraid. "And what do you say?" Finally, she turned. Her eyes were steady, though they carried the weight of 1,000 hidden battles. "I say they fear what they do not understand." Daniel gave her a small smile. "Then maybe that's not weakness. Maybe that's power they're not ready for." For a brief moment, their eyes locked. It was not the gaze of queen and prisoner anymore. It was something else. A quiet understanding, fragile yet unshakable. But before another word could pass between them, the torches flickered. The doors burst open. Figures dressed in dark armor stormed in, their weapons gleaming with deadly light. Assassins. Daniel froze for half a second before instinct took over. He reached for the queen, pulling her behind the heavy table as a blade struck where she had been standing. Sparks flew as steel scraped against stone. The queen's eyes widened, but only for a moment. Then her training surfaced. With a swift motion, she drew the dagger hidden in her cloak. She rose from cover, slashing at the nearest attacker with precision. Daniel ducked low, grabbing a fallen staff from the ground. It was heavier than anything he had trained with, but survival gave him strength. He swung it with all his might, knocking one of the assassins back. The room erupted in chaos. Steel clashed against steel. Torches sputtered and shadows leapt across the walls. Daniel moved clumsily compared to the queen's grace, but his strikes were desperate and strong. He was fighting not as a soldier, but as a man refusing to die. 2. Assassins cornered him, their blades raised. Daniel braced himself, certain this was the end, until the queen leapt between them, her dagger flashing. She struck one across the arm, forcing him back while blocking the other's blade with her forearm guard. "Stay close to me," she commanded. Daniel obeyed, watching her fight with a mix of awe and disbelief. Every movement was sharp, controlled, deadly. She was not just a ruler. She was a warrior forged by countless battles. But even she could not fight forever. The assassins were skilled and many. Daniel's arms ached, his breaths came heavy, yet he refused to back down. At one point, he shielded her with his own body, swinging the staff wildly to give her space to recover. The queen glanced at him, surprise flickering in her eyes. He had no armor, no training with her people's weapons, yet he placed himself in danger for her. Finally, the sound of rushing feet filled the hall. The palace guards stormed in, answering the clash of blades. The assassins, realizing they were outnumbered, retreated swiftly into the shadows, vanishing as quickly as they had come. Silence followed, broken only by Daniel's heavy breathing. He leaned against the table, gripping the staff with trembling, and the queen stood tall, her dagger still in hand, her chest rising and falling. Her crown was slightly tilted, her cloak torn, but her presence remained unbroken. She looked at Daniel, and for the first time, her voice softened completely. "You fought for me," she said. Daniel wiped sweat from his brow. "I didn't really have a choice, did I?" "You had a choice," she corrected, stepping closer. "You could have run. You could have hidden. But you did not." Daniel met her gaze, his voice steady despite his exhaustion. "You stood for me when everyone wanted me dead. I couldn't just let them take you." Her eyes lingered on him. In that moment, the weight of her crown seemed lighter. The captain of the guard entered, bowing low. "Your Majesty, forgive us, we failed to protect you." The queen's expression hardened. "Find them. Whoever dared this must answer for their crime." "Yes, Majesty," the captain said before rushing out with his men. When they were alone again, Daniel sank into a chair, catching his breath. The queen moved to stand before him. For the first time since they had met, she lowered herself slightly, crouching so her eyes met his. "You are not like others," she said softly. "You are reckless, foolish, yet brave. You protected me as though my life mattered more than yours." Daniel chuckled weakly. "Guess I'm terrible at knowing when to quit." A small smile touched her lips. "Or perhaps you know exactly what it means to be loyal." Daniel looked at her seriously. "I'm not here to manipulate you. I'm not here to weaken you. I see someone worth standing beside." Her eyes softened. For a moment, the mask of the queen fell away, leaving only the woman beneath it. "You risked your life for me," she whispered. "And for that, you have my trust." The words struck deeper than any weapon. Daniel realized this was no longer about survival. This was about something larger, a bond forming between two people from different worlds forged in fire and danger. The queen rose again, her voice stronger. "But know this, Daniel. My enemies will not stop. They fear change. And now they fear you." This was only the beginning. Daniel gripped the staff tighter. "Then let them come. I've already survived once. I'll do it again." Her lips curved faintly. "You are reckless," she repeated, but this time, her tone carried respect. As the torches steadied and the palace quieted, Daniel knew the path ahead would not be easy. Yet in that quiet chamber, something had changed. He was no longer just a prisoner. He was something far more dangerous. Someone the queen trusted. And trust in a world of fear was the most powerful weapon of all. The palace of Arthenis did not rest after the attack. The halls echoed with footsteps of guards, the clash of weapons during drills, and the whispers of servants who carried news faster than fire. Everyone spoke of the assassins, but more than that, they spoke of the queen's strange decision to stand beside a human. Some called it foolishness. Others feared it was the beginning of change they did not understand. Daniel felt the tension each time he walked through the corridors. The guards still glared at him, though they no longer dared to touch him. Servants whispered as he passed, quickly lowering their eyes when he noticed. He knew the queen's protection was the only reason he lived, but he also knew protection had its limits. That morning he was summoned again. The throne hall blazed with torches brighter than usual, as though the queen wanted the light itself to drive away the shadows of the night before. The council sat in a half-circle, their faces grim. Soldiers lined the walls, their armor polished. The air was thick with expectation. Daniel was led to the center of the hall. His boots echoed against the black stone floor. He looked up to see the queen sitting tall on her throne, her crown shining in the firelight. She seemed untouchable, yet her eyes, when they met his, carried warmth hidden beneath steel. One of the advisors stood, his robes flowing. "Your Majesty, enough of this. This human is a danger. He has already brought assassins into our walls. If you keep him here, more will come. He must be executed or cast out at once." Another council member rose. "Yes, Majesty," the people whisper, They say you grow weak, that you let a stranger cloud your judgment. If you do not act, you risk losing the respect of your throne. The queen's gaze swept over them, cold and steady, but she did not speak yet. She allowed their voices to rise, one after another, all demanding Daniel's removal. Daniel stood silently, his heart pounding. He wanted to speak, but he knew his words would mean little in this hall. This was not his fight to win. It was hers. Finally, the queen rose from her throne. The room fell silent. She descended the steps slowly, each movement deliberate. Her cloak swept the floor as she walked toward Daniel, then turned to face her council. "You speak of weakness," she said, her voice ringing through the hall. "You speak of fear. You believe strength is measured by how tightly I grip the throne. But you forget what true strength is." The council members shifted uneasily, but none dared interrupt. The queen raised her hand, pointing toward Daniel. "This human stood beside me when blades sought my life. He had no armor, no training, no duty to me. Yet he fought. He shielded me with his own body. Tell me, council, is that weakness, or is that loyalty?" Murmurs spread through the chamber. Some lowered their eyes. Others clenched their jaws in defiance. The queen stepped closer to Daniel, her voice firm. "He risked his life when many of you would have hidden behind guards. He showed me courage without crown or throne, and I will not cast aside such loyalty because you fear whispers." Daniel felt a weight lift from his chest, though he kept his face steady. He realized she was not only defending him, she was declaring something larger. The queen turned back, to her people. "I am your queen, and I will not rule by fear alone. Fear bends knees, yes, but trust builds loyalty, and loyalty endures when fear fades." Her words echoed against the stone walls. The council sat frozen, unsure how to respond. Then the queen did something no one expected. She reached out and placed her hand lightly on Daniel's shoulder. The hall gasped as one. "This human is under my protection," she said clearly. "From this day forward, he will walk beside me as my equal. Let all who challenge this know they challenge me." The silence that followed was heavy. Some faces were pale with shock, others burned with anger, but no one spoke against her. Not a single voice dared rise. The queen looked at Daniel, her expression softer now. "From the moment you called me your queen, you were already bound to me. And now let it be known. You are my human." Daniel's breath caught in his chest. He had no words. All he could do was bow his head slightly, not out of fear, but out of respect. The hall remained silent for a long moment, until finally the queen returned to her throne. She sat tall, her presence unshaken. The council members exchanged glances, but did not argue further. They had seen her decision and they knew it was final. Later, when the hall had emptied, Daniel found himself alone with her once more. She removed her crown and set it aside, her shoulders relaxing for the first time that day. "You risk much for me," Daniel said quietly. Her eyes met his. "And you for me. Trust, human, is a dangerous thing. But perhaps it is the only thing worth holding." Daniel smiled faintly. "Then I'll hold it, as long as you do." The queen allowed herself a small smile in return. It was rare, almost fragile, but it carried more power than any command. Outside, the city buzzed with the news. Some called it scandal. Others whispered it was the beginning of a new era. The people did not yet know what this decision would mean, but one truth was certain. The queen had chosen a human to stand beside her against tradition, against fear, against the weight of her own counsel. And in the quiet of the throne room, Daniel realized his joke. The careless words that had once been spoken to lighten fear had become a bond that changed two worlds.